I still remember the day I first encountered the supernatural. I was just a teenager then, living with my family in a small town in the middle of nowhere. It was a quiet and peaceful place where nothing ever happened. That's until one night. It was a stormy night, and I was alone in my room, scrolling through my phone. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. I sat there in the darkness, listening to the sound of rain hitting against my window. That's when I saw it. A shadowy figure appeared before me, standing at the foot of my bed. It was tall and dark, with glowing red eyes. I froze in terror, unable to move or speak. The figure just stood there, watching me, staring at me. Then, without warning, it vanished into thin air. The lights flickered back on, and everything returned to normal. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew it was real. From that day on, everything started happening around me. Everything would move on their own. Doors would creak open in the middle of the night, and I would hear strange whispers in my ear when no one else was around. I couldn't take it anymore. I can't find that in my best friend, who suggested we seek out of the help of a local psychic. I was skeptical at first, but desperate for answers. The psychic, an elderly woman named Madame Zara, listened to my story and nodded knowingly. She explained that I had a gift, the ability to see and communicate with the spirits of the dead. At first, I was terrified. The thought of being able to see ghosts and spirits was too much for me to handle. But as time went on, I began to embrace my gift. I learned how to control it, and even help others who were struggling with their own supernatural experiences. Now, years later, I still encounter the supernatural on a regular basis, but instead of fear, I approach it with an open mind and a sense of wonder. Because of myself, I have to get along with. She had been searching for the perfect home for months, but nothing seemed to fit her budget or her taste. That was until she stumbled upon a small old-fashioned house on the outskirts of town. The house was surrounded by a thick fog, and the porch light flickered ominously. But despite her reservation, she stepped out of the car and approached the front door. Sarah stepped inside and was immediately struck by the musty smell of old furniture and decaying wood. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper. The realtor led her through the various rooms, pointing out the features and benefits. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the mansion. As they reached the upstairs landing, Sarah noticed a small door tucked away in the corner. "What's in there?" she asked, pointing out to the door. The realtor hesitated for a moment before answering. "Oh, that's just the attic. It's not really part of the house, so I don't usually show it to clients." But Sarah was persistent. She wanted to see every inch of the house before making a decision. So the realtor handed her the key to the attic door and stepped back as she opened it. The stairs leading up to the attic were steep and narrow, and Sarah found herself struggling to climb them. The attic was filled with old furniture, a presence lurking in the shadows, watching her every move. Sarah tried to ignore it and focus on the task at hand, but her eyes kept darting back to the corners of the house. Small cracked mirror with a strange inscription etched into the surface. It read, "Beware of what lurks behind the glass." As she reached out to touch the mirror, Sarah heard a loud cracking noise behind her. She turned around to face the source of the sound, only to find that the stairs leading down to the rest of the house had vanished. In their place was a solid wall. Sarah raced back to the mirror and tried to break it with her fist, but the glass was unbreakable. She had tried everything she could think of to get out, but nothing worked. As the night wore on, she began to hear strange noises coming from the other side of the mirror. Whispers, moans, and footsteps, all growing louder and more menacing by the minute. Just when she thought she couldn't shake it anymore, the mirror suddenly shattered into a million pieces, revealing a hidden room behind it. She stumbled inside, relieved to be out of the attic. As she looked around the hidden room, she realized that it was a shrine to an ancient goddess of death, and the whispers and footsteps she had heard were the spirits of the people who had been trapped in the house before her. As Sarah tried to make her way out of the house, she knew that she had escaped a fate worse than death, and she vowed never to trust a realtor again. I never believed in the supernatural until I moved into my new apartment. It was a place with a lot of character. But as soon as I moved in, things started happening. At first, it was just small things. I would hear footsteps in the hallway when I knew I was the only one home. Everything would move on their own, and I would find them in different places. But I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispers in my ear. I sat up in bed, heart racing, but there was no one there. I tried to calm myself down, but as I lay back down, I felt a cold breath on my neck. I tried to leave the apartment, but the door wouldn't budge. A woman, dressed in white, standing there. She had a sad look on her face, as if she was trying to tell me something. But before I could say anything, she disappeared. Every night, the woman in white would visit me, each time getting closer and closer. I tried to ignore her, but she wouldn't go away. And then, one night, she spoke. "Leave this place," she said. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I tried to leave again, but the door still wouldn't budge. I was trapped by this supernatural eternity. That's when I found a diary hidden in one of the closets. It was written by a previous tenant, and it detailed all of the strange things that had happened here. The woman in white was the ghost of a lady who had died in the apartment years ago. I knew then that I had to leave, but even as I packed my bags, the woman in white was there, watching me with her sad eyes. It was like she didn't want me to go. As I left the apartment, I felt a cold breeze on my neck. But there was no one there. She was still in the department. I've always been fascinated with houses. The way they are designed, how they reflect the personality of the people who live in them, and the secrets they hold within their walls. So, when I saw the abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town, I knew I had to explore it. As I made my way through the overgrown garden and up the creaky front steps, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The front door was slightly ajar, and the darkness inside became me forward. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and entered the foyer. The air was musty, and the floorboards creaked under my feet as I made my way into the living room. The room was dimly lit, but I could make out the faded wallpaper and ornate furniture. I felt a chill run down my spine as I heard a faint whisper. There was no one there. I shook it off and continued my exploration. As I reached the second floor, I found myself in a small room with a single window. I felt a sudden cold breeze on my neck and turned around to see a figure in the corner of the room. Her face was twisted in a grimace of pain. She began to moan, and I could hear a chorus of other voices joining in. I screamed. The door had locked behind me. The voices grew louder, and the walls began to close in on me. Just when I thought all was lost, I saw a glimmer of light. A small window in the corner of the room had opened. I ran towards it, squeezing through the narrow opening just as the walls closed in completely. I fell to the ground outside. I knew that I stumbled upon something that should have remained hidden. That house, with its dark secrets, was not meant for the living. I stumbled upon the old house while driving through the countryside. in state of Georgia. It was hidden behind an overgrown hedge, its windows boarded up and the paint on the door peeling away. I couldn't resist the temptation to explore it, so I parked my car and made my way inside. The interior was darker than I anticipated, the only light coming from a small slit in the boarded up window. As I walked through the rooms, I noticed that the house was abandoned for years, covered in cobwebs and dust. The air was thick with the musty smell of neglect. I made my way to the back of the house, where I found a staircase leading to the second floor. The steps were old and creaky, and I was hesitant to venture up, but my curiosity got the best of me. So I climbed the stairs, one by one, until I reached the top. The hallway was lined with doors, and I felt a chill run down my spine as I approached the first one. I opened it, and the room was empty, save for a single piece of furniture, a rocking chair that was eerily moving on its own. I tried to steady my breathing as I moved to the next door. I saw a room that was frozen in time. There were toys scattered on the floor, and a small bed with a teddy bear lying on it. It was as if the child who lived here simply vanished into thin air. I moved on to the next room, and it was then that I heard the first strange noise. It sounded like footsteps, but there was no one else in the house. My heart was pounding as I quickly moved to the next door, hoping to find a way out. But as I opened the door, I was met with a sight that made my blood run cold. The room was filled with dolls, all staring at me with black, lifeless eyes. They seemed to be alive, moving their heads and arms as if they were beckoning me closer. I tried to run back down the stairs, but the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me in the haunted house. And that's when I felt a cold hand on my shoulder and a voice whispering in my ear, "You're never leaving." I never believed in ghosts until I moved into the old house in state of Georgia. The realtor had warned me that the house had a history, but I brushed it off as just a sales tactic. But as soon as I stepped inside, I could feel that there was something off about the place. At first, it was just things. The creaking of the floorboards at night, the flickering of the lights, and the occasional feeling of being watched. But then, things started to get more intense. Objects would move on their own, and I could hear faint whispers in the dead of night. I tried to ignore it all, telling myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But then, one night, I woke up to find a figure standing at the end of my bed. It was tall and shadowy, with glowing red eyes that seemed to stare straight into my soul. I screamed and ran out of the room, but the figure followed me, its eerie laughter echoing through the halls. I tried to leave the house, but the front door wouldn't budge. I made my way up to the attic, hoping to find a way out through the windows, but what I found up there was far worse than anything I could have imagined. The walls were covered in strange symbols. As I tried to make sense of it all, I heard a voice whispering in my ear, telling me to join them. I turned around to find a group of ghostly figures surrounding me. I knew then that there was no way out. The house had claimed me, and I was doomed to spend eternity trapped within its walls. And as I felt their cold, bony hands closing in around me, I knew I wasn't alone. The old house on Cherry Street had claimed many victims before, and it would continue to do so for as long as it stood. As a real estate agent, I was always on the lookout for the perfect home for my clients in state of Georgia, but there was one particular house that always caught my attention. An old abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. It had been on the market for years, but no one ever seemed interested in. One day, I decided to take a closer look. As I approached the front door, I couldn't help and feel a sense of unease. The paint was peeling, and the windows were boarded up, and the lawn was overgrown with weeds, but something about the house drew me in. As I walked through the foyer, I felt a chill run down my spine. The air was musty and stale. The only sound was the creaking of the floorboards beneath my feet. I made my way through the rooms, each one seemingly emptier than the last. but as I entered the master bedroom, I felt a sudden change in the atmosphere. The room was still empty, but it felt as though someone or something was watching me. I turned to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. I tried to push it open with all my strength, but it was as though I was pushing against a solid wall. I heard a faint whisper. At first, I couldn't make out the words, but as the voice grew louder, I realized it was coming from the walls, and it was talking to me. I tried to run, but the hallway seemed to stretch on endlessly. The walls were closing in on me. I could hear screams coming from the other rooms, but it was powerless to help. Just as I thought it was the end, the house released me from its grasp. I stumbled out onto the front lawn, gasping for air. As I looked back at the mansion, it seemed to shrink and wither away before my eyes. I never went back to that house again. I could still feel its presence in my dreams. I could hear the walls begging me to come back. I would ride my bike around my neighborhood, admiring the different colors and styles of the houses. But there was one house that always stood out to me, the old mansion at the end of the block. It was a beautiful structure, but something about it gave me chills every time I passed by. One summer day, I was walking home when I noticed something strange about the mansion. The windows were all boarded up, and the once green lawn was now an overgrown mess. I couldn't help but feel a creepy vibe coming from the house. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the mansion. I talked to some of my neighbors, but no one seemed to know why the house had been abandoned. I was sitting in my room reading when I heard a strange noise outside. I peeked out my window and saw a shadowy figure moving around in the yard of the mansion. I couldn't make out any details, but I knew it wasn't a person or an animal. My curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to investigate. I snuck out of my house and made my way to the mansion. As I got closer, I saw the front door was slightly ajar. I hesitated for a moment, but then pushed the door open and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the musty smell, and cobwebs covered every surface. I cautiously made my way through the rooms, feeling like I was in a haunted house. As I entered one of the bedrooms, I saw a figure sitting on the edge of the bed, but her face was hidden in the shadows. I turned to leave, but something grabbed me from behind. I spun around, but there was no one there, and I heard a faint whispering coming from all around me. I ran from the mansion as fast as I could, but I knew I wasn't alone. The feeling of being watched stayed with me for weeks, and I couldn't shake it, no matter how hard I tried. One day, I saw a news article about the mansion. It turns out a woman had been murdered there years ago, and her killer had never been caught. The mansion had been abandoned ever since. The mystery of the mansion was finally solved, but the memory of that night stayed with me forever.